Quite a few changes have come to Warhammer the Old World and the fair lands of Bretonnia with the 1.5 rule set update. It's enough of a change that I really wanted to update my previous video about how to build a Kingdom of Bretonnia list for an escalation league. Like always, I want to go over some guidelines first. The list will start at 500 points and go all the way to 2000, growing by 500 point increments, which is pretty standard for an escalation league. And these lists are being built with the idea that once a unit is added, it cannot be removed from future lists. So if your 500 point list has 1 unit of Knights Errant, your 2000 point list must also have 1 unit of Knights Errant. Of course, unit size can go up and down, upgrades can be given and then removed, and of course your hero units can upgrade and downgrade. You can go from a Duke to a Paladin, back to a Duke, all with the same model if you so choose. These lists are built with the updated rule set in mind, but not the match play guidelines. Escalation leagues are usually on-ramps for new players, so I didn't want to require an extra book for any of these lists. That being said, I do recommend using these enhanced rule set if you have the means, if only for the secondary objectives, which add a bit of strategic layer to the game. These lists should be pretty compliant with the match play guidelines anyways, you just might have to downgrade some heroes in your lower level point list, but maybe not. And finally, keep in mind that these lists are not meant to be hyper competitive. An escalation league is mostly a casual for fun thing. I'm trying to build lists at a balanced power level that include all unit types so a new player will have experience with all of them, as well as being true to the lore if possible. For example, lore-wise, questing knights are the coolest units Bretonnia can field, but they're not necessarily a very efficient unit, so you won't find them in a competitive list, but you will find them in my escalation list. At the end of this video, I'll give an example of a competitive 2000 point list both for open war and for match play, but the main focus of this video is going to be on these escalation lists. But first, I just want to quickly cover the most important 1.5 changes for Bretonnia. The Falcon Horn is arguably the most nerfed item of the 1.5 update. It's gone from an item that was an auto-include on every list to an item you should probably never take in any circumstance. The nerf was absolutely warranted, but if they were going to make it a single-use item, they should have made the effect automatic rather than requiring a leadership test still. Even though the failure rate is low, a single-use item that you paid 40 points for that could end up doing nothing is incredibly bad. They basically just deleted the item from the game. Pegasus Knights are now more expensive and lost the lance formation. And again, this nerf was probably warranted, but it really doesn't change much. Your Peg Knights are still going to be your best unit and should find their way into most, if not all, of your lists. Honestly, the biggest loss here was all the time you took to model your Pegasus Knights so they could fit into a lance formation. The Ogre Blade is now 75 points instead of 65 points, and while that's a minor price adjustment, it does break a few combos and my heart. You are still going to see this item a lot, both on your list and on your opponent's list, but you'll no longer be able to stack as much defensive items on the character you put it on. And sadly, one of my favorite tricks of putting the Ogre Blade on an Illusion Mage is now dead. On the opposite end of the spectrum where things are being buffed, infantry across the board for all factions are now a lot more viable than before. Honestly, infantry being better is a net negative for Bretonnia, who wants to focus on cavalry, but our men-at-arms and our foot knights are technically better after this update, and this could open new viable ways to play in a semi-competitive setting. Men-at-arms are the best non-undead tar pit in the entire game, and I've seen them used to great effect in large units of say 40, 50, I've even seen people run as large as 60. I've seen some people swear by foot knights and they are obviously better after the update. I still don't think they're a good unit, and I maintain the best use of that kit box is to customize your mounted knights. Lady Elise kinda gets a buff in the sense that it's addition by subtraction. With Mage Dispel being nerfed across the board, her natural arcane backlash makes her the best non-dwarven unit in the game at dispelling enemy spells. Typically, I prefer generic characters over named characters, but Lady Elise is quite good. The last thing I'm going to bring up is the lance formation, and while I don't think it was intentional, rules as written, it took a massive nerf. Per the 1.5 FAQs, 2 rows of a unit are now in fighting rank, but must be within movement range to strike. This is to prevent people from doing long conga lines. Per the Lance special rule, all knights on the outside of the formation are considered to be in base contact with the enemy's fighting rank. Per a separate rule from the main rulebook that was untouched by the FAQs, all models within base contact can fight. Therefore, every model in the first two ranks can strike back at a lance formation regardless of actual distance from the lance. It's my personal belief that this was not intentional, it was just a mistake of the rules update. But it is the rules as written, so you need to talk to your group to see how they want to handle this. If they want to play rules as written, the lance formation is basically worthless as the cons outweigh the pros by quite a bit. Rules as intended, where the movement range matters, you can still expect another 3 to 4 attacks back on your lance per side, which is still a nerf but is much more manageable. And of course, this depends on your local meta as well. If nobody's willing to go wide against your lance, this really doesn't matter. And even with the nerfs, Bretonnia is still a very strong faction in the Old World, which will probably garner a sigh of relief from any old head who is playing that 6th edition Bretonnia book well into the end times. Carried by both their heroes and Pegasus Knights, I'd probably put Bretonnia a tier below Tomb King's Vampire Counts and Cathay. But regardless, we're here to build an escalation list, and let's get started with that now. At lower point levels, quantity is probably more important than quality, so we're not investing a lot into our damsel and we're not taking a paladin. I did pay a little extra to make her a wizard level 2, and that's so I can take the signature illusion spell as well as something else. If I get one of the good illusion spells, awesome. If I don't, I can just switch that out for something from the Lore of the Lady and I'm good to go. I like illusion magic a lot. Most people seem to favor battle magic. I definitely see that the most. Honestly, I think all the lores of magic are pretty good, so play around a little bit, use what suits you. As far as unit goes, we have our peasant archers. These are going to be our skirmishers and can be used to screen your knights or harass your opponent. They're really a jack of all trades unit and very efficient for the point cost. We also have a fairly large unit of men-at-arms in a 5x5 stack. This is going to be a great tar pit for us. Ideally, we would bog down an opponent's unit with our men-at-arms and then charge them from the side or from the rear with our Knights of the Realm. The Knights of the Realm are going to be the bust for your damsel, but more importantly, they are the main source of power in this list, but it is totally dependent on whether you get the charge off or not. If you are new to Bretonnia or new to Warhammer, these lower point games are an excellent time to learn how to position your knights to make use of their lances. Winning the movement metagame and being the player who makes the charges is the most important skill to master if you want to win games as Bretonnia. At 1000 points, we're keeping the same basic strategy but adding a couple more layers to it. We pay a small premium here to upgrade our damsel to a prophetess, and this is purely to give her a higher leadership stat so we can make her the general and free our paladin to be our battle standard bearer. For our paladin, we're putting him on a Royal Pegasus just because Royal Pegasi are very awesome, and of course it goes with our Pegasus Knights. We take the War Banner for our battle standard just because it is a standard that works in almost all situations. There's not a lot of cases where it won't be helpful at some point, so it's very point efficient. I also went ahead and gave him the Grail Vow and Syrian's Locket just to make him a little bit more defensive. Obviously at these low point levels, models is still more important than heroes, so maybe you want to strip that back a little bit and put in more models in your regular units, and that's perfectly fine as well. Our core units remain the exact same. I'm just shuffling the model count around to fit other things, but all the units are the same and they play the exact same role. You want your damsel, prophetess with your knights, you want your archers as skirmishers, and hopefully you can tar pit something with your men-at-arms. We are adding the trebuchet. This will give you a taste for artillery and is a good unit to pressure your enemy's infantry. A common mistake I see in new players, or at least something I consider a mistake, is when they try to put their trebuchet far away from everything else. You want it in your back line, but you don't want to put it off in no man's land. If you put it so far away your other units can't support it, it's easy points for your opponent as they move in with something fast. If you keep it closer to your units where they can't support it, your opponent has to take a bigger risk to try to take out your trebuchet and hopefully overextends. Finally, we have your Pegasus Knights, probably the most deadly unit in the Old World, at least the most deadly unit for Bretonnia. They can basically do it all, just don't let them get charged, make sure you're making the charge with them. Depending on your local group, Running Pegasus Knights in a 1000-point list might be seen as kind of try-hard and maybe too strong for your escalation league. If you have to dial these back, replace them with Grail Knights and put your Paladin on a regular horse as well, and distribute the remaining points as you see fit. Moving on to 1500 points, we once again add another hero. The biggest strength of Bretonnia is still within their characters. Due to a limitation on points, we're leaving him as a Baron rather than a Duke, but that does mean we have less room for magical items, and in this case it means less room for defense. But with the virtue of Knightly Temper and the Ogre Blade, we're making him an absolute monster on the charge, and putting him in that unit of Pegasus Knights means you absolutely should be able to get off the charge, hopefully ending the enemy unit in the process. One more thing I want to point out about the Baron, because I see this a lot, is notice I did not pay to put a lance on him. In older editions, Bretonnia had a special rule where they could use a lance on the charge even if they had a magic weapon. That is not the case in the Old World. We downgrade the Prophetess back to the Damsel because we no longer need her to have a higher leadership stat, but she plays basically the same role. And our Paladin stays pretty close to the same, but we're ditching the Grail Vow and we're giving him the Virtue of the Joust because he's also going to join that unit of Pegasus Knights, and this will help make that charge even more deadly. The last new thing added is one more unit of a Knights of the Realm. Keep in mind that this won't have a Damsel in it, so it won't have the same buffs as your first unit, but you'll still use it in the same way, hopefully getting offside in rear charges. This list does place a lot of eggs in one basket with your Pegasus Knights, so just be very careful about where you put them and try not to get them bogged down. At 2000 points, we can flesh out this list a little bit more and add some of our cooler knights. Our hero units look much the same, but we can afford to upgrade the Baron to a Duke, which gives us more ability to add magical items to them, so we'll give him Syrian's Locket. For the escalation list, I kept the core fairly simple and just buffed up this men-at-arms to be bigger to be a better anvil. But if you feel pretty good with the list and are comfortable with all your units, I would strip away points from your men-at-arms and add 10 more skirmisher archers for a screening unit for your other knights. Your Grail Knights, even when there's just 5 of them, are now your most elite hammer outside of your Pegasus Knights. Put the Damsel with them and try not to get them stuck in the tar pit. They are expensive and only have 1 wound, so you need them charging turn after turn after turn. They're not going to do well if they're bogged down in combat, especially with something cheap. Finally, we have a unit of Questing Knights here, and that's because this is an escalation list and this is the time to use your coolest units. They might not be the best unit in the Old World, but this unit of 5 should work pretty well as a hunter of your enemy's monstrous infantry. These lists should serve you pretty well in an escalation environment. It will help explain and show every aspect of the game that Bretonnia has available to them. It also should be strong enough that if you play well, you can win your games, but it's not overly min-maxed to the point where it's obnoxious in an escalation environment. So that's it for my escalation list, but just for fun, I want to leave you with one more list. This is what I would try to bring to a competitive environment, a 2000 point list for match play. The list is fairly top heavy, but I don't see anything wrong with that. When you're playing in a competitive environment, you need to double down on your strengths, and Bretonnia's strengths is their heroes. We have the Duke kitted out as strong as I can possibly get him. In my opinion, this is the best all-around kit for the Duke. We're going to put him with the 4 Pegasus Knights with the banner of Chalons, so nobody can stand and shoot against him as well. I'm bringing Elise here rather than a regular prophetess for a couple reasons. One, named characters are immune from some of the restrictions of match play of combined arms, so we can have 4 heroes instead of 3. Even if we didn't get that, Elise is a great value for her point cost, and she is one of the best dispellers in the game, which helps us bully the opponent's mages. We kitted out the Paladin with Virtue of Duty, so he has to run solo, but he is our BSB, so keep him close to your other Pegasus Knights so they can benefit from the banner. Using the combo charge, he is also kitted out to be a duelist, so if you need a character killer, this is your unit. Just be careful of your positioning of him because he's by himself. I squeezed in a nearly naked Damsel here as well, only wizard level 1. If you don't think this is worth it, I would use the extra points for the banner, But for me, I'm taking the low level damsel and I'm putting her in a bus of Knights of the Realm and I'm using her to buff the knights. In my opinion, glittering robe's the way to go, but the Lady's Wrath is not wrong either. Our core is very similar to what I run in the escalation list. I do think this is a solid core. You might be asking yourself, after all you talked about infantry being buff, why aren't you running men-at-arms? And the main reason is a minimum unit of peasant bowmen is very useful. A minimum unit of men-at-arms is basically worthless. In a highly competitive environment, I wouldn't run a list of men-at-arms of less than 30. And those are points I'd rather spend elsewhere. And let's say you did take that stack of 30 men-at-arms. That's roughly 140 points. And you have to hold an objective with them. That's 140 points that are now just sitting on one objective versus just 50 if you use the peasant bowman. And the rest of the list is dedicated to Pegasus Knights. This shouldn't be a shock to anybody. They're one of the best units in the game, even after the point increase. And if you're in a competitive environment, you want to maximize your best units as much as you can. The group with the magical banner, you'll want to target and harass missile units. The other one can be used for everything else. There are a lot of ways to build and play this game. I'm not going to say that this is objectively the best list that you can build, but this is where I would start with in a competitive environment, and I think it'd do quite well at a tournament. If you feel differently about this list or any of the escalation lists really, let me know in the comments. Other people can be helped by that as well, and you're not going to hurt my feelings. But even if you did, a good shower cry is good for the soul every now and then.